So hello everybody and welcome to the January 2024 edition of Fiction Fix Online. This event is being live streamed to the Finger on the Pulse, the Facebook group for Fiction Fix Online, and the Zoom video will be posted afterwards on my Helen Gould channel on YouTube. So please subscribe and please point all your friends to it. And by the way, you can view all previous editions of Fiction Fix Online in the playlist on my YouTube channel. You'll be pleased, I hope, to hear that I have managed to finish and publish my first two Zarduth Imperative books during 2023. I have copies of them here. Okay. Let's put those down a minute. I'll be reading from the second of them at the end of the session today. And I'm starting up my newsletter again, though it might be a little bit late this month because I'm also trying to do my tax return. And I'm also restarting my writing and self-publishing workshops, which will run over the summer and into the autumn. And I'm working on a new book for publication. It's called The Invisible Dance. I will also be opening my proofreading and editing services from April the 1st to August the 31st. Oh, and if you haven't seen, we have acquired 3 beautiful kittens just before Christmas, and they're loads of fun. So if you wish to join the Finger on the Pulse, please ask to do so or message me on Facebook to ask for an invitation. There are a few rules to review and some questions to answer, but the group is for both readers, i.e. authors, and listeners. These days it's a private group, but we are still here. That's maybe why you couldn't find us, Noel, as it's a private group now. We had to move it to a private group because Facebook kept putting loads of people who were not remotely connected with you know, what we do here, and don't know why, but you know, anyway. So at our Fiction Fix live events, we used to have a books table. We can't do that here with Fiction Fix Online, but for our authors reading this afternoon, please post your book details in the chat. Do include your website along with a link or links to the ebook and the seller or sellers for the print version. Prices would be helpful, and an ISBN or ASIN if you have it. On Amazon Kindle, the ASIN should take readers straight to the book, which would be pretty useful. And I'll post all the details with the live stream and video or in the comments below as appropriate. If you hear something you really like, please use the reactions, which is on the bottom. I'll try and put it up. It's not. Oh yes, I don't know, can you see that up at the moment? It's got the little smiley face, so if you want to, you can do a heart, or you can hang on a minute, you can do clapping or a thumbs up or something like that, just to say I'm really enjoying this. Okay, I'm sure I'm teaching Granny to suck eggs there. But yeah. Yeah, so now if you would like to please unmute everybody, your hands are required to do some work. So today we have 5 returning guest readers, 3 from America and 2 from the UK, plus me, yours truly. And Noel starts off our afternoon with a reading from a story from his latest book, Skunk Works Manual, Volume 2, Mutate and Survive. So will you please put your hands together for Noel K. Hannon and the Selflings? Thank you so much for muting yourselves during the actual readings. Okay.
Okay, I'll take it away, Helen. Thank you very much for that intro. Okay, so my story of the Selflings is a tribute to both John Wyndham and Margaret Atwood, and you may detect some references to both. I finished this one on New Year's Eve 2022, and it was published twice in 2023. First in Trevor Kennedy's Phantasmagoria, and then in my own Skunkworks Manual Volume 2. An illustration in that latter book was done by my partner's daughter Megan, who's 12 and very, very talented. So without further ado, here is The Selflings. It was, in retrospect, the highlight of my career, but one is rarely so cognizant of such events as they unfold in real time. It is only later, under the scrutiny of High Command and the after-action reports, reviewing the body cam footage and the subsequent international media frenzy and the promotions and the awards, that you can truly appreciate the magnitude of what we achieved that day. We literally saved mankind. The reports state factually that my team deployed to the small fishing port of Lubeck, Maine, on the evening of Saturday, 10th of January 2042. This far north, there was snow on the ground, and the good people of Lubeck had yet to take down their Christmas decorations, which looked sad and faded in the dull lights from the port. Further south, this would have earned them a reprimand from the protocol patrols. But here, right up against the Canadian border, there was less visibility and much less governance. These people had been smugglers since Europeans first landed here. Fish, tobacco, alcohol, drugs, weapons, whatever needed to cross the border, they would carry it for a price. It had always included that most common yet sought after commodity, people, and now it included dangerous, heretical technology. Even in its heyday, there were only ever a handful of hotels or motels in Lubeck. This place is a dead end, the US Interstate 189 morphing into the Canadian Interstate 774, and then dropping neatly into the Bay of Fundy off Campobello Island. The target had been identified in the cheaper motel, so my team booked into the more expensive one and let the US government pick up the tab. The team was very small, just myself in command and operating as the intelligence collection officer, and 3 door kickers, the Duke, Dutch, and Connor. I had worked with them before, and I had handpicked them for this mission. None were under 40, and they were all dependable, resourceful, veteran special forces operators with enormous experience of this kind of discreet operation. Ghosts, my grey ghosts. I had hoped that their more kinetic skills would not be required on this occasion. It is hard for men like this to blend in. They have a physicality and confidence most men lack. Here in northern Maine, in January, it was a little easier, as we could bury ourselves under layers of damp flannel plaid, work boots and duvet jackets, and look to all the world like 4 weary fishermen heading for the bar after a long trip in the bay. And that is exactly what we did, occupying a window snug in a tavern overlooking the motel, and watched the wide, flat frontage until the target emerged from one of the doors, looked furtively left and right, and made her way down to the motel reception, returning a few minutes later with a carton of milk and a pack of sodas. She disappeared into her room. We were on. The target was female, of course. Dr. Lindy Neumann, age 45, degrees in biochemistry and genetics, commissioned military service in the US Marine Corps Reserve, active duty tours in Belarus and Taiwan, a senior corpsman. Once a Marine, always a Marine. I doubted she would come quietly, hence my small but perfectly formed team of ghosts. I figured 3 of these bad boys were worth 1 Marine, and a female one at that. They were worthy, but only just. The Duke, the biggest and most aggressive of my operators, didn't bother with the usual discreet knock device and just shouldered the door in. He was intimately acquainted with the poor structural integrity of Comfort Inn motel rooms. He stamped on the falling door and stepped to the left as it fell, clearing the entrance and allowing Dutch and Connor to enter quickly behind him. All had Glock pistols drawn up and in the aim. Dr. Neumann was sat on the bed, her own Glock an arm's length from her on the bedside cabinet to her right, and her left arm around a young girl of no more than 8, who had her hair and colouring, pale and Nordic. We had bagged ourselves a selfling. Bingo. There was a second or two while Dr. Neumann considered reaching for the gun, but a quick appraisal of the situation made her think twice, and that was enough. I was in the room immediately after Connor, lifting the door back into its place behind me and jamming it upright, as Dutch and the Duke seized the 2 females on the bed, separating them, flipping them onto their fronts and plastic cuffing their hands behind their backs. Neither made a sound. Dutch and Connor did a quick cursory sweep of the apartment, 1 room and a bathroom, then both exited via the shattered doorway, sealing it behind them as best they could. They would run security, leaving myself and the Duke to conduct the tactical assessment. the girl face down, focused on Dr. Neumann to start with. I turned her over, pulled her into a sitting position on the edge of the bed. She stared at me, eyes full of barely contained rage, but her face impassive. She was an attractive woman in a slightly weathered, outdoor kind of way. Not really my type. It didn't surprise me that she was an insurgent, and a senior one at that. This was really shaping up to be a significant bag for us. How did you find us, she asked, voice calm with just the hint of a tremor. There was a certain resignation in her now, a flicker of the flame in her eyes, as if it was preparing to be extinguished. Often a calm like that can mask an intent, a sudden outburst of violent action. She was certainly capable of that, and I would need to be very careful. I pulled the chair over from the dressing table and sat in front of her, straddling the chair back, out of arm's reach. I sensed the Duke's presence at my shoulder, like a wardrobe about to fall. Loose lips sink ships, I said. It was too much to resist, wasn't it? Mom and Dad in the neighbourhood. Wanted them to meet little, what's her name, for the first time? Dr. Neumann closed her eyes and dropped her chin. What is her name, Dr. Neumann? Your daughter? Dr. Neumann lifted her head and a nerve visibly twitched in her neck. Precursor to violence. I felt the Duke shift in his stance and gravity a little. Just a vague disturbance in the airflow and displacement in the room. Laura. Laura. Hey, Laura, don't worry. We won't hurt you. We just need to ask your mom some questions. We'll be right with you, baby. The girl didn't stir. She had her eyes open and was staring at Dr. Neumann, unblinking. But the thing is, Dr. Neumann, she isn't really your daughter, is she? Not really. Dr. Neumann did not respond to this. She just stared me out with a fuck you, Marine look. I stood up and began to move around the room, moving in and out of her personal space, daring her. Unfortunately, Dr. Neumann, you couldn't resist showing her off to Mom and Dad. A granddaughter for them at last, of a sort. Mom was over the moon, wasn't she? Thought she looked just like you. So much like you. Dad. Well, Dad wasn't so convinced, was he? A good man, your dad. Career Marine, law citizen. The kind that notes and reports things to the appropriate authorities. Oh, I'm sure it pained him, giving up his only daughter like that. But he did the right thing. Don't judge him too harshly. He is, after all, just a man. A fat tear rolled down Dr. Neumann's left cheek. Her shoulders shook slightly. You bastards making him do that. He did it all by himself, Dr. Neumann. Didn't need any encouragement from us. Like I said, good citizen. What say we take a look at our little selfling here? She made a move as I crossed in front of her to place my hand on the girl. Dr. Neumann came off the bed, head and shoulders low, intended to butt me into the Duke. But he was very fast for such a big unit, and he intercepted her easily with one meaty paw, sweeping up and under her head to grip her throat and lift her back on the bed in one swift and apparently effortless movement. I saw him take a moment to pinch her neck and cut off blood and oxygen to the brain, just enough to make her gasp, then pushed her back down, standing over it and trapping her with his body weight against her legs. Now that was a stupid move, Dr. Neumann. Moves like that will only end up in tears. The Duke here graduated top of his class at the Specialist Applied Rapist School in Guantanamo too, didn't you, big guy? Let's not allow him the privilege of showing you just how good he is today. That is not what we're here for. Oh no. The threat could not have come as a surprise to her, but it quietened her all the same. The Duke released his weight from her legs and assumed a guard position close by, thumbs in his belt. Well, you have what you need. What else do you want from me? The girl? Oh, we didn't come for the girl. The little selfling was a bonus. We're taking her. Oh, yes, but that isn't what we come for. Duke, take little Laura out to Connor and Dutch, will you? Dr. Neumann didn't move while the Duke lifted the girl effortlessly and took her outside. Don't worry, she won't be hurt. She snorted at this. You're going to dissect her like a frog. It won't give you what you want. No one can give you what you want. Darwin should have listened closer to his barnacles. I did not know what she meant by that. And what is it that I want? The formulas and algorithms for creating selflings, male selflings, to clone men who can breed. That is correct, Dr. Neumann. If that information was shared with our government, then our respective communities can pool resources and solve this problem. But your community has chosen to hide itself away on Grand Manan Island, just inside Canadian waters, and perfect the art of female cloning. Your intent is the ultimate destruction of the male gender, is it not? She shook her head so vehemently, I almost believed her. No, that is not true. Male chromosomes do not react to the cloning process in the same way that female chromosomes do. We spent years trying to solve this. Our intent was to create a genetically sound process which would create fertile males and females to redress the balance. But that has failed. The female self-link process is the only success we have had. And besides, she paused and looked down at the bed again. You need a womb to carry a self-link to full term. Look at our country, what we have become, a totalitarian religious dictatorship. We have no wish to become a race of breeding cows for you. I almost hit her at this point, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled. But Dr. Neumann, without man, there can be no mankind. It was her turn to smile. We could just be kind. Thank you for listening. There is a little bit more.
Okay. I appreciate that you stopped there. I think it's a good point to stop. Thanks, Noel. Right, so would you like to give a big hand for Noel's book? Please unmute. So when I used to run Fiction Fix in the pub, I learned how to clap really, really loudly, but you can't kind of do it on here.
You have to cup your hands to do it.
Well, I found if you do it like that, it's really loud as well. Yeah. Anyway, so thank you very much, Noel. And now, all the way from America, we welcome back Chris Frey. Am I pronouncing your name right, Chris?
It is Frey, but I answer to Frey.
Oh, right, okay. That it's because of Don Frey in the Eagles. You know, yes. That's how I thought it was pronounced, because it's spelt the same.
Right.
Okay, I will try to remember. Okay, so please show your appreciation for him, writing as Raymond Parish as he reads from the 3rd volume in his thriller series. The book is called The Last Step, and it features his Hank Anderson character. So thank you all so much for muting yourself during the reading, and take it away, Chris.
Thank you, Helen.
Right.
We expected Phil Evans when the front desk let Harry know a police detective was on the way up to the condo. My gut butterfly nosedived when I saw Goodman get off the elevator instead. Here comes trouble, Belinda said. Her loyalty to me demanded disdain for the man. To his credit, he didn't delay the excruciating seconds it took him to trudge down the hall. We found Dennis. He's safe. Polite, reassuring, way too nice. Something terrible had happened. Thank goodness. Dennis steadied his hand on the doorframe. Where is he? Let's invite Goodman in, I said, so he can answer all of our questions. The detective's rumpled, world-weary presence brought more than physical weight into the room. Where is he? Jerry hit repeat, impatience overpowering his relief. He's with Phil at the station. He has not been harmed. He did not harm himself. He has not used alcohol or any other drugs. But, I said, he called Phil and turned himself in. I saw him set his feet as if expecting a roundhouse punch from any or all of us. He's being held on suspicion of an illegal transfer of funds. Jerry towered over the stout detective. Sit down and explain yourself. Then we'll go collect my husband. The menace in his tone suggested Goodman's report could determine his future health. The man's face told me he heard it too. Goodman sidled into the kitchen, sat at the table, folded his hands, and waited for Jerry to sit in his line of sight. Belinda joined our friend. Greenberg says an unknown person, possibly male, contacted him by burner phone yesterday, threatening violence against himself. He pointed at each of us, his family, and his friends. This morning, he was contacted again and told to go to the city library, log onto a computer, and transfer a large sum of money into several new accounts. How much money? Jerry asked. I can't tell you. Whose money? We've reached out to the victim and have people following the stolen funds as we speak. I appreciate you letting me know my husband is safe. Jerry's sincerity had an edge. That being said, you could have notified us by phone. What else can you tell us about this nonsense that will bring your presence here more useful? I poured a cup of black coffee, setting it in front of Goodman to make it harder for Jerry to reach across the table and grab him by the throat. He took a sip, holding Jerry's glare. Greenberg, his name is Dennis, Jerry interrupted, pushing his own cup to the side. Another sip. Dennis claims he took the threat seriously and couldn't risk what would happen if he refused to follow the caller's instructions. He completed the transfer before turning himself in. A spark of life eked through Goodman's detachment. He was impressed that Dennis had turned himself in. We dispatched detectives to the library. They picked Dennis up without incident while safety measures for possible targets were being put in place. Targets? Jerry rested a protective hand on Belinda. You mean the people he loves? Goodman kept rolling. I've been to the nursing home to check on Dennis's dad. He's unharmed. Since then, I've been sitting in your parking lot. He tipped his head my way. We have a patrol car sitting on your ex's house, Hank, keeping an eye on her and your daughter. My gut roiled. I hadn't answered Gail's earlier call. Haley, my dad. Something in the neighborhood of a smile showed on Goodman's face. We're also keeping an eye on your dad, Anderson. He hasn't reached out to you because, and I quote, he didn't want to distract anyone from the issue at hand. He assured Detective Evans he has all home security devices on full alert. It was not Dad's first ride on the Anderson and Greenberg counseling roller coaster. Goodman set his mug on the table. That's all I have for now. Before any of us could generate a question, the doorbell chimed. We stood in unison. I'll get it. Goodman pushed his chair back and moved to the peephole. Sport coat open, hand inside on his gun. Yippee, he monotoned, opening the door to Jill Bennett in full-on courtroom regalia. Navy business suit, pearl high-necked silk blouse, briefcase in hand. Her eyebrows raised at the sight of our doorman. Update, please. She blew past the detective. Jerry toppled his chair, getting to her. They found Dennis. He's been arrested. She dropped the briefcase, stood on her toes to hug him, and shot us her best I got this look. Goodman closed the door and shoved his hands in his pants pockets. Well, it looks like the band is back together again, Hank. He made it sound as if the whole mess was my fault. What's the story? Jill ignored his dig. I ran what we know past them before you got here, Goodman said. Run it again. Goodman shrugged and gave her a recap of events. Her stance registered a warrior's fierceness at the words threats of violence, illegal transfer of funds, and turned himself in. I am Mr. Greenberg's attorney. No one is to conduct any further interviews with my client until I have an opportunity to meet with him. Too late, Goodman said. What do you mean, too late? Your client volunteered full disclosure when he reached out to Phil Evans, counselor. Well, call in and tell your people that Jill Bennett said, shut it down, now. She ushered him to the door. I'm holding you and Detective Evans personally responsible for his privacy until I can speak with him. Goodman had no doubt been browbeaten by combative lawyers many times over. He surprised me by not biting back. I'll sit in the parking lot and follow you to the station. He looked at Jerry. I hope this turns out well for Dennis. I have a soft spot for guys like him. Bewilderment replaced Jerry's dead-eye stare. I was the only member of the team who knew what his husband and my chief antagonist had in common. Guys like him meant fellow recovering alcoholics. Watching Goodman amble down the hall, I realized he had skipped his requisite mocking of me and my line of work. Dr. Frankenstein, Sigmund Freud, I'd heard them all. I didn't like the harassment. I liked its absence even less. No snappy repartee meant that Dennis in one piece had solved a serious problem and opened a whole new can of king-sized worms. I didn't know Jerry had time to put you on the guest list downstairs, counselor, I said to Jill. All the staff knows me, she said, kissing me on the cheek. Of course they do. I reviewed her stylish battle garb. You showed up dressed for a fight. Hope for the best. Prepare to kick butt and take names if necessary, Hank. Let's do that exact thing, Belinda said. We grabbed jackets. We nudged Jerry out the door, locked up for him, and she herded us down the hall. The elevator doors opened to my ringtone. I checked the screen and stepped back. I need to take this. Hurry, we'll meet you outside, Jill said, doors closing. Dad, I was surprised to hear from him. Son, I won't keep you. Wanted you to know I invited Haley and Gail to your place, escorted by the police. There's a police car sitting down the block. I have the fireplace going. We're secure and toasty warm. Thanks for keeping track of them, Tiger. Is Haley around? I can hear her flying down the stairs. She wants to say hi. Hey, Dad. Grandpa says you're running around with Uncle Dennis and Uncle Jerry today. Tell them I miss them and we need to get together soon. Will do. Good to hear your voice, kiddo. Are you okay, Dad? Sure. Wishing I was home partying with the cool people. You're so goofy. I'll let you go then, kiddo, she mimicked me. You can tell me what's really going on later. Bye. Thank you.
Right, well, would you like to unmute yourselves, please? And let's hear it for Chris, writing as Raymond Parish and The Last Step.
Thank you.
Okay, so now, who's up for a bit of time travel SF? Because we have a lady who's been on a few times before. So please welcome back Marise Morland. She's worked hard to prepare her novels for publication. She's a bit like me, you know, always wrote, but the tools to self-publish weren't there, at least not in their current format, and has now published several novels in a couple of years. Really well done, actually. So a lovely round of applause, please, for Marise Morland as she reads from her latest book, Time and Elvira Jones. And thank you so much for muting yourselves during the reading.
Right. This isn't quite the beginning of the book, so I've got a couple of sentences here to introduce my main character. Elvira Jones is a young particle physicist working at Coherence Co., a secret research establishment in Hampstead. She's just applied to be project leader and been turned down in favor of an underqualified man. And she's expected to work as his subordinate. She goes home early to consider her options. Elvira's silver Volvo halted at the barrier. The guard was on his landline and remained on it for over 3 minutes. She beeped at him impatiently, and at last he came to the window. Sorry, Princess, that was downstairs. Some particles got uppity and spoilt their experiment, and the CCTV, mine included, got messed up for the same few seconds. Did you see anything unusual? Such as? He shrugged. I'm not allowed to guess. I saw nothing and no one, Max. Now stop interrogating me. I'd like to go home. No kung fu tonight? Max inquired. It's mixed martial arts and no. But I've time for a quick demonstration if you don't open that gate. He grinned and raised the barrier. Elvira eased the Volvo out of the complex, accelerated, then braked a few seconds later. Someone was lying in the slip road. She pulled over and opened the door cautiously, suspecting a setup. But there was nowhere for an accomplice to hide, and the fair-haired young man on the ground was genuinely injured. A gash over one eye oozed blood. Dazed and disheveled, he flinched as she leant over him. Good lady, forgive. I was clumsy. What happened? Were you mugged? I was running from bad people. To prevent them following, I had to launch without a receptor. Receptor? What's that? The entangled opposite. Times, forward, arrow. A thin trickle of blood ran from his nose. Oh, great. Elvira contrived to sit him up. Can I call anyone for you? Focus, damn it. He focused. I need to find Coherence Co. I know it's here. It has to be. Elvira reached an instant decision. Right, you're coming with me. We'll talk some more later. Can you stand? Okay, I've got you. Now slide into the passenger seat. She rummaged in the glove compartment and found some tissues. Here, use these and try not to bleed on the upholstery. Seatbelt on. No, not like that. She returned to the driver's seat, then ensured he was strapped in. My flat's 6 minutes away. We'll get you sorted, and then you can tell me all about the bad guys and what they have to do with Coherence Co. Compliance, good lady. She wondered if he was being sarcastic, but thought it best not to ask. Her flatmate's car was in the drive. Relieved, she parked alongside and called her. Vivette, I'm home. Can you come down? Now. I've someone here who's in a spot of bother. His name's... She held the phone toward the young man. Paris Everson, he supplied shakily. Paris? Queried Vivette. Nice. I'll be with you in a tick. They bundled their mysterious guest up a flight of stairs to the first floor flat. Hey, Paris, said Vivette once they were indoors, before I allow you anywhere near my bespoke cushions, you'll have to lose that overall. It's a mess. Muddle down one side and the sleeve torn open. Where's the zip? Buttons? Anything? Paris lifted his right hand fractionally, and the material parted from collar to waist. Magnets? Cool, said Vivette imperturbably. Now step out of it. Disappointingly, he was wearing a plain grey vest and knee-length shorts. Is this indecorous? He inquired. Vivette arched an eyebrow. I think you could do with a makeover. Elvira left her to her ministrations and went in search of a first aid kit. When she returned, Paris had been allowed to sit down. Why are you so woozy? Vivette was asking. Are you on something? I swear I'm not. Face of Plessis. She stared. How do you know my surname? Not now, Viv. Elvira came forward and began to clean the grit and congealed blood from Paris's forehead. Make yourself useful and get him some brandy. But didn't you hear what? Brandy, move it. Yvette's annoyance lasted precisely 1 minute. Paris's look of pure gratitude was an ample reward. She held the glass steady while he sipped, and gradually some colour returned to his face. So, mystery man, Elvira said gently, would you mind explaining yourself? That was the deal. If you insist, answered Paris, avoiding her gaze. Some criminals in my workplace were defrauding rich clients out of their money and then killing them. I tried to get evidence, but I wasn't careful enough. As I told you earlier, I launched myself without a receptor to avoid pursuit. I'm a time traveller, Miss Jones, from your future. Without a receptor, one's body weight displaces the continuum on arrival, and this creates a series of ripples, which is disorienting, even painful, for the traveller. You don't believe me, do you? Elvira said nothing, recalling the energy burst that would cost Coherence Co. a day's work. I believe you, said Vivette. She'd retrieved the grimy overall. This hole's busy repairing itself, and we all know that can't happen. Yet. I insist on knowing how it's done. I will tell you, he promised, but first, what year is this? Vivette tossed a copy of Vogue at him. He scanned the cover, then thrust it aside with an oath neither of the women recognized. Sounds like you screwed up, Vivette said impishly. You could say that. I thought I'd reached 2073, the year the Time Travel Institute was formed. Instead, Coherence Co. is still in its infancy. In-house experiments, Elvira confirmed. Forgive my ineptitude, Paris said tonelessly. If it's any kind of excuse, I was in fear of my life. If you were heading for 2073, began Elvira carefully, what year are you actually from? 2584. Yet you still speak 21st century English. I'm speaking Standard Protocol 2000 London. Each TTI employee has sleep tuition in language variants. Time tourists have to blend in, and we have to monitor them. He held out his glass for a refill, his second. Before you drink any more of that, said Elvira, tell me when you last ate. He summoned a grin. Not since breakfast, and that was only veggie sim. 7 hours? Just as well I asked. I'll order in. She readied her phone. Any preference? Pizza, curry, fish and chips? Real fish and chips? He echoed. Elvira didn't inquire what a fake version was like. Ladies, Parish said formally, may I be permitted to bathe before the meal arrives? The launch setup was messy, and I probably smelled of tungsten relay oil. Oh, so that's what it is, trilled Vivette, propelling him toward the ensuite. Do you know how everything works? In the bathroom, I mean. I've read the history manuals, he responded through the closed door. Must you keep winding him up, Viv? Elvira said reprovingly. He's kind of cute, said Vivette by way of an excuse. Yes, and he's also tired, hungry, and scared. There's a lot more he needs to tell us, so enough of the teasing. Thank you.
Right, that was great, but very witty actually, Marise. So will you please unmute yourselves now and put your hands to work again for Marise Morland and Time and Elvira Jones. Right, brilliant. Oh, this is a very varied fiction fix, so I'm really happy. So now we've got Dale E. Lehman, who is going to read his story, Keep Out Signs, and this is from the Manifest Secrets short fiction collection, his latest publication, which has a brilliant cover. Have you got a copy there to flash up? Oh, yes, indeed. So please, let's join Dale as he takes us on a dark journey. And many thanks for muting yourselves during the reading. Right. Take it away.
Sorry about that. I'm going to save explanations of this story for the author chat because the reading will run just a tad long. A light chop danced over the face of the Chesapeake. Wave peaks sparkled in the morning sun, while darkness swirled in the troughs like entrances to the underworld. At the helm of his cargo boat, Chuck Boyd amused himself with that image. Water postmen, unlike their land-bound colleagues, both delivered and hauled away, carrying mail and supplies to isolated islanders, returning with trash and sometimes the deceased bound for the port of Havre de Grace. It was a long slog, and body disposal, although not an everyday occurrence, entailed forms and fees and registered transport coffins. If only they could dump the departed into the bay. Rounding Love Point, Boyd bore east-southeast toward the Kent Narrows archipelago, a weird name for the wide swath of water dotted with islands. Kent Narrows vanished 20 years ago as rising sea levels and sinking bedrock fragmented the land. In another half-century, only flecks of rock and mud would remain. Maybe when the last landowners fled, mapmakers would change it. For now, people held as stubbornly to the name as they did their ephemeral ground. In the meantime, Boyd's boat bobbing over the water was a welcome sight to islanders. He cultivated cordial relations with those on his route, not because it lifted their spirits, although it probably did, but because they were strange and desperate folk prone to fits of insanity. There were stories. Postmen on well-maintained craft had vanished among the islands in perfect weather. Boyd loved the freedom of his boat and the smell of the bay, but he had no illusions about the people he served. He took it at a moderate clip and in 15 minutes made Boot Island, a sliver of land 500 feet long, shaped like a pointy-toed boot. Just two people called this island home, a skeletal old white man named Dr. Mesick, a long-retired physician who held claim to the leg of the island, the larger stretch to the north, and a brown-skinned woman of 37 who called herself Chastity, although she wasn't chaste, not when Boyd came to call. She owned the foot of the island. A rickety white picket fence crossing the boot's narrow ankle separated their holdings. Mesick was Boyd's first stop, Chastity his favorite. The two neighbors, for their part, hated each other. Mesick never failed to bring that up, usually sooner rather than later. This time it was the first thing from his mouth. You ain't seen that whore again, I hope. You ought to stay away from her. She'll stab you in the back and steal your boat like she stole my land. Stole it right from under my nose. He tapped his nose with a bony finger. Boyd had barely set foot on the dock. The wood creaked under him as he put his full weight on it. Well, Doc, she's pretty enough, and she's got to eat too, you know. Let her starve. She comes up here, I'm ready for her. He waved his cell phone in Boyd's face, but it was too close and moving too fast for Boyd to see what was on it. Best to change the subject. I gotta ask, what you want with copper wire, electric blankets, and boat batteries? They came mixed in with your groceries and clothing orders. Mezek took a surreptitious look around as though someone might be watching. Things have been getting weird, he whispered. The more these islands sink, the more folks out here looking for places to escape. Boyd figured anyone looking to escape ought to get off the bay. Plenty of space on the eastern shore, or the Piedmont, or even the mountains. Only stubbornness kept people on these doomed isles. But you ain't even got a boat. Why the batteries? Because it ain't safe no more, Mezek said. They'll kill you and take you home, just like that whore will. Her land's sinking faster than mine. She'll be up here next. But folks are fighting back. Look at this. He handed his phone to Boyd. It displayed a social media post with instructions for building a simple but useless circuit using battery to power an electric blanket. Others had posted comments seeking clarifications and sharing modifications. Boyd scrolled and skimmed. What the hell's this, Doc? Booby trap, Mezek said. Look. He flipped to another social media page where people had posted photos of makeshift transport coffins with accompanying comments. One less squatter, waiting for you. Guess what's inside? Boyd stepped back and almost fell off the dock. He caught his balance at the last second. Mezek grinned. Them's keep out signs. By the by, his grin turned sheepish. There's a coffin back there with the trash. You mind dumping it for me? Coffin? Who could have died here but you? It's just junk, but you and me's the only ones know it. What, you posted a picture of it? The keep out sign? Yep. People see that, they know I'm ready for them. But Doc, you know I can't dump a transport coffin. Anyone sees me, I'll get slapped with a fine, even if there ain't a body in it. Mezek messed with his phone some more. How much? I'll pay you direct. That's bribery. That's business. Well, if it was just trash, if he dumped it after dark, if it was heavy enough to sink. 100, Mezek asked with raised eyebrows. Fine, Boyd said, but just this once. The old man tapped some instructions and Boyd's phone chimed. When he checked it, the deposit was in his account. He pocketed the device and got to work unloading. Half an hour later, he drove the doctor's incoming goods via motorized cart up the dock and down a path into the woods. He unloaded them to Mezek's front porch and helped the old man carry them inside. Then he loaded trash bags and the coffin onto the cart and returned to the boat. The trash he dumped in a refuse hold for delivery to Haverty Grace. He left the coffin on the deck and threw a tarp over it. As Boyd set off across the bay, Mezek waved farewell, looking like a tattered scarecrow with a demon's grin. Chastity boarded before Boyd had tied up, and in a tangle of arms and legs, they sank to the deck, shedding clothing. Afterwards, they climbed down to a floating dock at the end of the boat dock and sat naked with legs dangling in the water. You got my stuff, she asked. All of it? All of it, including wires, batteries, and electric blankets. You building keep-out signs too, like Doc? She spat into the water. I wish he'd die already. He's got to be 200 years old. Boyd laughed. If anyone living looked that old, it'd be Mezek. Can't be too careful, Chastity said. People are nuts. Come on, Chastity. It's just you and Doc here, and he's too old to cause trouble. She squinted across the water. The more land sinks, the more squatters come around. This spot is mine. They can't have it. Yours, huh? Doc says you stole. Hell with him, Chastity snapped. Did you? She didn't even look at him. I don't care, he said. Just curious is all. She kicked up a splash of water. I didn't steal nothing. Wasn't Doc's land ever. I had an uncle lived here named Ethan. Ethan was older than Doc. Doc figured he'd grab the land once Ethan died. I got it first. My family, my land. That would have been before Boyd started this route. He'd been delivering to Mezek and Chastity for over 3 years, with Doc railing about his neighbor the thief the whole time. Not that he could do anything about it. Wasn't much law in the islands anymore. But Boyd did have to wonder, so he asked, your uncle have a will? Did he leave the land to you? Chastity kicked at the water again. The droplets sparkled in the sun as they fell. Let's go. You got to unload, and I got to get my checklist so I know you ain't cheating me. My phone's in my pants. Unlike you. Whose fault's that? Boyd laughed. Yours. You tackled me. Only because you're the only man comes around who doesn't want my house. He helped her back onto the boat dock. Oh, hey, she said. There's a coffin with the trash. Ain't nobody in it. Just junk and a dead skunk. The hairs on the back of Boyd's neck bristled. Skunk? Yeah, best not to open it. She held her nose and waved at the air. They boarded the boat and got dressed. Then Boyd went to work unloading her packages, batteries and blankets and wire included. What the hell you do with this stuff, he asked. Doc showed me the instructions online, but I don't get it. Battery for power, wires to carry current, electric blanket to draw enough amps. There's a bit more to it, but that's the idea. Enough amps for what? Boyd wasn't sure he wanted to know. Cooking, she laughed. Come on, let's get stuff up to the house. Once he had the cart loaded, she sat beside him, her thigh pressed against his, her arm draped his shoulders. He wasn't sure he wanted to be that close to her. Electric circuits and coffins and skunks, it creeped him out. Was it just Doc and Chastity, some weird twist on their private war? But no, the post Doc showed him had replies, lots of replies. There were others building these contraptions on these islands. They arrived at her little Cape Cod house in the clearing. He unloaded and helped her carry her supplies inside. When they were done, she closed and locked the front door and leaned against it. One for the road? I got a heavy schedule, he objected. Oh, come on, I only get any when you drop by. She slowly undressed and approached him, and by the time she got there, he'd forgotten keep out signs. He wrestled her to the couch and they went 2 rounds before she pushed him up. Don't use up your strength, she cautioned. You still got that coffin to carry out. That killed the mood. I got to inspect it, he said. Just dump it in the bay, nobody will know. That's against the law. Are you going to bribe me too? Sure, come back on your day off. Every day off. I don't know, Chastity. They rose and dressed and went out to the cart. He drove it around back, loaded up the trash, loaded up the coffin. He drummed his fingers on the wooden box. I got to inspect it. I'm sorry. No, Chuck, please. So it wasn't trash, wasn't a skunk. The fear in her voice told him so. She'd killed someone. Maybe Doc had killed someone too. So had other islanders, and other postmen had taken bribes and dumped the bodies in the bay. How many were down there? How mad were these people that they'd kill and die rather than move to solid ground? He had a toolbox in the cart and a crowbar in the toolbox. Transport coffins weren't made to last, only to convey the dead to funeral homes. He applied the crowbar to the box and began prying off the lid. Please, Chuck, please don't, please. Chastity grabbed his arm. He shoved her off, spilled her onto the ground. Chuck, don't, you don't know what, Chuck, he's not dead, he's not. Nails creaked as the top began to separate from the box. The terrible stench leached out. Boyd gagged on the smell of burned flesh and barely heard her words. I didn't know what to do. She scrambled to her feet and tried to pull him away again. I couldn't just. He forced the lid up and spilled it off the other side. He looked down at the body within, eyes shut, still as death, thin burn lines cut into clothing and flesh, yet somehow still breathing. My God, Chastity, what did you do? I don't know. It just didn't work. It didn't kill him, and I couldn't. She hung on him and squeezed her eyes shut. I couldn't do it. Please, Chuck, don't tell anyone. Please do it for me. Please take him out there. And releasing him, she stumbled blindly toward the woods. Boyd rushed after her, caught her, held her. Chastity, I can't just. You did it for Doc. Why can't you do it for me? Doc said, oh, hell, what was in that coffin on his boat? Had Mezzig's device failed too? I need a gun, Chastity. I can't leave him like that. I need a gun and I don't carry one, against regulations. Chastity buried her face in his chest. I don't got one either, she whispered, but no problem. I got an axe. Thank you.
Right. Okay. So, right. So, please unmute yourselves again now, and let's hear it again for Dale E. Lehman and Keep Out Signs. This is from his latest collection, which is Manifest Secrets. Do you want to show your cover again, Dale? I think.
Yeah, it's if you
it's a fantastic cover.
If you can, if everybody can see me on the big screen, it'll be easier to see the cover.
So, yeah. That's good. Great. Really good.
Great. Okay, so let's give Dale a round of applause for that.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Right. So, right, now we're going to go back in time again as Pat Spencer reads from her latest novel, Golden Boxty in the Fry Pan. But it isn't science fiction, it's historical fiction. So please, a warm welcome, rather, back for Pat. And many thanks for muting yourselves during the reading.
Thank you all. The narrator in this section is Katie, and she's 9 years old at this time. And this is not the beginning of the book, it is a middle chapter. They are Irish immigrants. My older sister, Mary, grits her teeth and grips the aluminum mixing bowl as if someone might steal it from her. The clang of the metal spoon reminds me of the Philly train engineer ringing his bell. How different would life be if we had stayed? Katie, I should have had you sneak Mrs. Murphy's rat poisoning from her gardening supplies. a sprinkle mixed with the powdered sugar on my cocoa cake, and this woman of Daz will stand before St. Peter, begging to be let into the pearly gates before either of them figures out what we did. Ed clenches his throat and makes puking sounds. I cover my mouth and laugh. Not funny. My brother crumples down the wall into a mass of writhing arms and legs. I tell him, "You could go to hell." Sweet Jesus, save me from the devil. Ed folds his hands in prayer and gazes upward. It was for a good cause that I poisoned her. Listen, dummy, I say. This woman will become our stepmother and take care of us like we are her own. Last week, Joe took us to the Colorado Theater, downtown Main Street, for a rerun of Dracula. Now, knowing how scared I get, Ed scuffles across the floor on bended knees and imitates Bela Lugosi's deep, threatening tone. Wah! Save me, Katie. The devil's hand is upon my shoulder, forcing me down, down into the center of the earth. I'm burning. Get me Mrs. Murphy's deadly powdered sugar. Mary wiggles her eyebrows and shapes her hands into claws. Please. I shove my sister away and peek in the oven door. Earlier, I chopped rutabaga, onion, potatoes, and leftover brisket, wrapped the mixture in pockets of short crust pastry, then crimped the edges. Now the juices bubble where the golden crust split. My pasties smell heavenly. Mary followed Mrs. Kozak's New Year's Eve recipe and rubbed fresh thyme and chopped fennel into the chicken skin. I chuckle. My Irish pasties sit alongside the Jewish hen waiting for the fallen woman Mary wants to poison. Close the oven door and go get the boys, says Mary. We should leave the little stinkers with Mrs. Odell so we can eat a calm and peaceful dinner like we're all adults. Best this woman see us as we are, a shouting, blubbering mess of snot-faced boys. Mary winks. She'll run screaming from this house. Then I won't need Mrs. Murphy's rat poison. Still using his Dracula voice, Ed shouts as I head to Rose's to collect Billy and Tommy. It'd be a good thing we did, saving the woman's life like that. An hour later, Mary opens the oven door. My chicken's shriveled. Your pasties are burned. Guess you're getting your wish. Da's woman won't want to stay for dried up food. Billy, who says he's a big boy and now must be called Bill, climbs up 2 kitchen shelves as if it were a jungle gym and drops the open box of grape nuts. I ignore him and glance toward the ceiling. Overhead thumps sound like a burlap sack of raccoons rolling across the floor. Ed shouts at Joe, "You bleeding maggot, give me my card." When Tommy bumbles past, I smell an all-familiar, stinking to high heaven scent, just when I thought I had him potty trained. As I tug his waist and peek down the back of his trousers, the front door opens. In steps the woman, wearing a heavy crepe pelham blouse with an exquisite cream lace caplet that clings to the curve of her shoulder and flares mid-arm. She poses as if to have her portrait done, points a high-heeled, top-stitched T-strap shoe out from the flounce of her Copen blue ankle-length skirt. I bite my upper lip to keep it from rising in disgust. The red scarf tied around the woman's neck reminds me of my 3rd grade teacher reading The Scarlet Letter aloud last week. I should greet this woman. Instead, I say, "Sorry, I've got a mess." I steer Tommy toward the bathroom, help him take off his trousers, and shake his underpants over the toilet. Holy Virgin Mother, please forgive me for what I'm about to do, but I won't let this woman disgrace my mother. A greenish-brown mound plops into the water. If caught, my punishment will be severe, but this woman must be driven off. I run my right index finger along the edge of Tommy's underpants and pick up a thin layer of poop, then force the smirk off my face. Go tell Ed you need clean pants. Naked below his manly green checkered button-up cotton shirt, Tommy darts into the living room. My big sister rarely swears like Joe. Today she makes an exception. Somebody get a hold of Bill. He's tracking freckin' grape notes across my clean floor. Katie, get the bloody broom. Ed and Bill thunder past as I use my unsoiled hand to retrieve the broom from the closet beneath the stairs. Then I stall in the dark to make Mary more frantic than she is now. Tommy spots me and squeals with delight. It's a game we play. The more I whoop, "Naked boy on the loose," the louder he laughs and the faster he scampers. I don't wish to disappoint my brother, so I ride the broom and crackle like a witch. I've never come after Tommy like this. He shows his joy by shrieking and throwing his hands over his head. As we roar into the living room, my mind fills with last November's newspaper photo of Norma Shear holding her golden statue after receiving the Best Actress Award for The Divorcee at the 4th Academy Awards ceremony. I remember it clearly because I had stared for hours, thinking if we had stayed on the train, I too would be in Los Angeles and could have put on my Sunday best dress and headed over to the Biltmore Hotel to see it for myself. I halt at the feet of Da and his woman, lean my broom against the wall, and smugly angle my chin and cock my head to imitate Mrs. Shear. When I reach out to shake the Scarlet Woman's hand, "How do you do? Welcome to our home," I resist laughing out loud about passing Tommy's poop to her and lift the crystal candy dish off the side table with my clean hand. "Have a peppermint." I wait until the woman slips a candy between her painted lips. "Made these from our dead mother's favorite recipe. Ma'am said peppermints work the best to overpower Da's stinky breath after he stays out all night, smoking and drinking with his mates." The Scarlet Woman delicately slips the tip of her painted ruby red fingers into her brassiere, removes a white linen monogram handkerchief, and expels the peppermint. I hide my snicker, skip into the kitchen, and scrub my fingernails across the carbolic soap until confident every trace of poop is washed off. Still, I have a creepy sensation from shaking hands, so I rinse again with steamy hot water. Mary throws a dish towel at my back. "Good Lord, your hands are corned beef red. Help me set out this food." "Will somebody put pants on this baby?" hollers Joe. Mary winks at me. "Do it yourself, you maggot." Da raises his voice. "I need all of you in the living room." Mary slams the oven door. Joe clenches his jaw the way he does when holding back his words and hoists Tommy onto his shoulders. Tommy grabs a hank of Big Brother's hair for balance, and Ed and Bill move into positions beside Joe. My sister and I join the boys as if lining up before a firing squad, only I'm not sure which side has the guns. Da says, "This is Margaret Ellen Kelly. I call her Maggie." "That's not what I'd call her," mutters Joe. Da's proud smile becomes a snarl. He raises his fist. And I will stop there. Thank you for your attention.
Right. Well, please now unmute yourselves again and give it up for Pat Spencer and Golden Boxty in the fry pan. Pat, let's do that.
Thank you all of you.
I was going to ask you, now I think this is a tale with special meaning for you and your family. So would you like to tell us why?
Da, who is my grandfather, is a pretty dreadful man, alcoholic, fairly abusive, mean. And when my mother's mother dies of an illegal abortion in 1936, it's very, very quickly, my grandfather brings home a new woman that the kids start calling the Scarlet Woman. And they don't want her. I mean, it turns out she's a pretty mean woman, or she's pretty mean herself. So, and she's negligent. He starts a family with her, and it's a bad situation. But the kids are spunky. They don't always make good decisions, as kids tend not to. But they're under a lot of stress. But they cope with it. They're strong. I've always been fascinated by children who have tough upbringings and
I'm
how
right there with them, all of those kids.
yeah, and then they turn out to be just amazing, wonderful, strong people. They have their flaws. All of these kids grew up to be very harsh disciplinarians. Half of them are alcoholics themselves, but they vowed never to let what happened to these kids happen to their kids, and they didn't. That's their greatest accomplishment to me. So yeah, it does. The whole book has special meaning. I mean, it's historical fiction because all of the kids were dead by the time I decided I would write this. So my cousins and I collaborated, and we did museum work and medical records and genealogy and all of that. So.
I thought you were going to just say something like, "Oh, well, it's a family tale." Right, we seem to be losing people a bit, so I think we need to move on.
Okay,
so
thank you
very much, Pat. That was great.
Thank you.
So I'm going to wind up the session with a reading from the Zarduth imperative Clanship. Now we're also stepping back in time slightly for this, as we'd got to chapter 10, so we're going back to chapter 3. Hardy Brencher has inadvertently joined the young crew of the Bakel and has opted to have a throat translator fitted. So we join him today in Medbay, just at the point of recovery. So I will just extract that. It's got to the stage with all these readings. I now have to write on them whenever I read them somewhere, so I don't read them there again for a bit. Okay. So, Hardy Brencher heard faint sounds nearby. He lay still for some moments and listened to the distant whisper of the ventilation system. Footsteps squeaked on the metal floor. When he'd gathered enough energy and curiosity, he opened his eyes to see who was there. Edith Chaper leant over him. "Ah, Monsieur Brencher, I thought you must be about ready to wake up," she said. He murmured. He put his hand up to his throat to massage the slight tenderness there as he spoke. He discovered a dressing. "That is there to stop you from doing what you just tried to do," she said, a stern note in her voice. "You will be fine in a day or two, but I would not touch anything for now, and it would be well to rest your voice." That's telling me to shut up and keep still, he thought, and grinned at her. The formality of her speech amused him, although he'd learned respect for her sincerity and concern for the welfare of the children. "Drink?" he croaked. "Here." She put a glass of water on the table beside his bed. "I'll help you sit up." He waved her away. The lassitude from the anaesthetic faded. He felt fine apart from a slight headache. He braced his hands under him and pushed himself up to sit on the bed just as the door opened. IR stepped into the sick bay. "How are you, Hardy?" "Fine," he mouthed and pointed to the water. "Take the rest of today off. You'll be fit enough to work again tomorrow," IR assured him. "How long?" "You." "I was just a kid. I don't even remember it. But children get a couple of days to recover. Adults only get one." A smile of genuine warmth and a tingle of humour replaced his usual dour expression. He held out his hand. "Welcome to the Zarduth, Hardy." Hardy grasped his thumb. "Thank you," he mouthed. "Dr. Chaper told me to rest my voice." "Sensible advice. Just rest today. No shooting, and especially no judo. I take it you've cancelled your classes?" Hardy nodded, lifted the glass, and let the water slide down his throat. It tasted better than the most delicious wine. "Good. When you feel ready, you can get up. No need to stay here." Hardy drank his water slowly. Then he swung his legs over the side of the bed. "I'll get dressed," he mouthed. "Do that, IR," IR said, and left the room. "I will give you some privacy," Dr. Chaper said, "but if you need help, call me." She followed IR. Hardy got up. There wasn't even any of the dizziness he usually felt after a space sickness attack, so the shot Dr. Chaper had given him before the operation in lieu of his usual medication probably hadn't worn off yet. He still had his underwear on. He pulled on and fastened his leather trousers and a lightweight shirt of woven fabric, then his soft leather jerkin. Finally, he sat on the side of the bed and slid his feet into his boots. He'd found a soft, comfortable pair that fitted well. He patted his breast pocket, checked at the gun's disappearance, and then remembered he'd given it to Josie the other day. It was the right thing to do, he thought. With that, she'd made progress. Soon she'd be able to learn to use the disruptor. He smiled in satisfaction. Why's she got such a hang-up about failure? He stepped forwards to the mirror, checked his silver blonde hair, short enough to need little attention from his comb. Then he examined the dressing at his throat. It had been taped on and was drenched in fluid, perhaps to prevent adherence to the wound. There were a couple of blood spots, but it looked neat. He wasn't concerned about it, but he noticed the small dressing behind his ear and put up his hand to investigate. As the sensation returned there, he became aware of a stinging. He shrugged and turned towards the door. The unit had been tested the day before and was in perfect working order, so he was in no hurry to try it out. He decided coffee was his most immediate need. He abandoned his usual stride and sauntered through the door instead. Dr. Chaper sat at the reception desk in the sick bay, reading on the computer. She turned and said, "Is everything all right, Monsieur Brencher?" He nodded and sketched a wave, then slipped out into the corridor. Hands thrust into his pockets, he mooched in the direction of the mess. Once there, he helped himself to coffee from the food synth machine, recalibrated for human use. He relished every sip. It's not often that I have nothing to do. "Oh, you're here!" He turned. Josie had a beaker of coffee in her hand. She wore a peach blouse and a pair of cream tapered slacks with turn-ups. He beckoned her over and gestured to the chair opposite. "No classes today," he murmured, and pointed to his throat. There was a note on the comm grid. "I always forget to check," she said, "but I remember you saying now." She sat down opposite and regarded him. "Hardy, why have you had this done? What difference does it make to you?" Then he frowned. That sounded rude, but he felt her disapproval, like a tangible wave. "None. It's the difference it'll make to you I'm concerned about," she retorted. "It will be beneficial in a combat situation," he said. He felt a little defensive. "Does it hurt?" "Stings a bit," he admitted, "but I think the benefits will outweigh any temporary discomfort." Josie shot him a disapproving glance. "You're human, Hardy, not Zarduthy." She indicated his clothes. "You even wear Zarduthy clothes now." "Ayar didn't leave me much choice, seeing as I came aboard without a spare stitch," he pointed out, and took another sip from his coffee, then pointed to his throat. "I think you disapprove because I have some electronic components inside me now. But if I were crippled and had to use implants to walk, would you disapprove of that?" "I guess not," she admitted. "I rest my case, and now I'm supposed to rest my voice as well. Thank you so much." And we'll leave that there. Thank you very much. And so I hope all you fab listeners enjoyed all of that. And many thanks to all our lovely authors and readers. That's Noel, Chris, Marise, Dale, and Pat for joining me. And thank you so much to our lovely friends and family and our studio audience, in inverted commas, for joining us and supporting our readers today. If you'd like to stay and join our chat with the authors after we finish, you are most welcome. That part won't be recorded or streamed, so if you put your video off, you can safely put it back on once I stop the stream and video recording. Now, authors, if you haven't yet done so, here's a reminder to please include links to your books in the chat or send them to me afterwards. And I'll post them on my timeline in Finger on the Pulse, on my LinkedIn and on my YouTube channel, Helen Claire Gould, and on my website, www.zarduth.com. Do include prices, ISBNs or ASINs, stockists, national, international and local, and your websites too. This has been Helen Claire Gould, comparing Fiction Fix online and bringing to your attention new and established writers in various fiction genres. Thank you so much for joining us. Fiction Fix is now back for a 3-month season, so I look forward to catching up with you on Sunday the 11th of February and Sunday the 10th of March at 5 p.m. till about 6:10 p.m. Slightly over today, but there are still a couple of places to fill for those dates. And we have another 3-month season in the autumn with dates in September, October, and November. So if you're a fiction author in any genre and would like one of those slots, please get in touch with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Goodreads messaging, or by email, which is helen.gould7@ntlworld.com. I'll put it in the chat, but I won't put it out generally. But I will put it in the chat in a minute. And just ask me for a slot. So bye now until Sunday, the 11th of February. Fabulous. Thank you so much.